Hello and welcome to a new devlog video for Peasant Uprise. While not really a widespread feature in medieval RTS, troop morale is a common factor in modern-day combat tactical games. Either way, in Peasant Uprise, morale plays a very important role that ties a lot of game elements together. There is a good logical reason why this is the case. Peasants, after all, are not your typical brave heroes that you would encounter in the battlefield. The morale of your rebellion will increase by quite a few factors. For example, winning a hostile encounter will yield a good morale boost, while more mundane options would include distributing some coin amongst your peasants. There are special actors like the Barb that can provide some motivational songs for your team. But the best way to keep the spirits high is by the means of a feast, which will incur a morale buff over time. On the opposite end of the equation, there are factors that negatively affect morale, like losing a battle, or not having good conditions, not having food for your peasants or a tent to sleep on, or not having the opportunity to get enough sleep. But additionally, there is a sub-factor tied to morale, and that's the notion of loss. Peasants are not a group of strangers assembled together. These are husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, uncles and aunts, neighbors, or folk they grew up with. Hence, when a peasant dies, it has a devastating effect on the entire group morale, and they'll be in a state of grief. The more peasants that fall, the more grieving time will be needed. This serves as an incremental morale debuff over time. While loss cannot be eradicated easily, there is one thing that would reduce this state of grief, and that's by providing proper funeral arrangements, including burial and blessing from a priest. And that's why it's important to have a priest come along on your rebellion and to build a small altar for proper prayer. The main combat philosophy in Peasant Uprise is that a single peasant is always against great odds versus a soldier, so the strength lies in numbers. However, peasants whose morale drops to a certain level would be tempted to leave the rebellion overnight, which in essence decreases your competitive advantage. So it is important to always keep an eye on your peasants' morale and making sure they're well taken care of. Moving along to the Q&A section, I was asked how long I've been making 3D models. I would say that I first started fiddling with Blender about a year and a half ago. But really what's important is not when you start, but how consistent you are. Committing yourself to a weekly goal for doing something in any of these 3D tools helps a lot to polish this skill. Next one asks if there are going to be underground levels. I'm afraid not, for several reasons. When working in a game where you manage multiple units, you need to be very aware of tight spaces that could create a bad game experience. Last thing you want to see is all your units bunched up together, blocking themselves from moving forward in a tight corridor. This would also pose a problem with your camp activities, and it would not make much sense to see berry bushes or trees underground. And overall, it would just not fit with the notion of moving horses and all your facilities underground. That said, I'm not opposed to the option of adding a cave where a quest would lead you, but it would have to be in a stealth mode where there's a requirement to have only one peasant on the field. But honestly, while this would be interesting, it is not in my priority list, and it would add additional complexity that I'm not sure I want to tackle anytime soon. Coming from the Discord channel, Zero Trees asks, what's the purpose of the altar? And I believe I've covered the overall reason for the altar in this devlog, which is to reduce grief time. But I would also use this opportunity to share that there are a few tasks that can only be performed by an actor of a particular profession. So the altar can only be used by the priest. in the same way as the alchemy station can only be used by an herbalist, and the stage of course can only be used by someone who can sing and perform like a barb. So on top of the array of skills and traits, profession is also something that makes peasants unique. Not only they perform better at certain jobs, but in some cases their skill set are a hard requirement to perform that job at all. Feel free to post your question in the comments or hop into Discord and post questions, suggestions, criticism, or simply come to say hi. With that said, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next update.